everyone, and welcome to another Home Tech podcast. I'm Seth Johnson, and I'm joined, as always, by Jason Griffin. Jason, how are you doing, man?
It's going great, Seth. How are you?
Doing well. Just relaxing here at the end of this is a Friday, right?
Well, I guess if you're listening, it's Friday.
Yeah, it's Tuesday.
Tuesday. Yeah, I was going to say, we don't have to tell anyone that we record on Tuesdays.
All right. Well, yeah, it's Friday, and
It's Tuesday, and Seth is working on a gin and tonic. But hey, there's nothing wrong with that, Seth.
Do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. It's Friday it's Friday somewhere.
It's Friday. Is it? That's funny. Well, we got a good episode here. I'm excited to present this one. It's been a number of weeks, but we had Chris Gamble with Live Install come back and join us. And for listeners who may not be familiar, Chris is based over in the UK, and he's become our UK correspondent of sorts, and he joins us periodically to let us know what's going on across the pond. And we always appreciate and enjoy those conversations. It really is a different perspective. There are just some unique subtleties and nuances to the way that the business is approached and handled over there versus how it is here in the States. And so I always enjoy hearing about that and hearing about what Chris has going on with his work and with his social media efforts under the Live Install banner. So a lot of fun, and we look forward to sharing that. So be sure to stay tuned. As usual, we've got a few news stories that we wanted to jump into first before we get to that. And the first one of those is a Control4 earnings call that took place this week. And we wanted to share a few thoughts on that. Generally good news, I think, out of the call. And Seth, I'll be curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, they must have sold a whole lot of new controllers.
Right.
Because they were up, revenue year over year was up 34%, and that doesn't include the new revenue that came from Pack Edge. So they did a great job. They really pushed through.
Yeah, it looks like they definitely got a good spike from the new EA controllers. I saw a statistic, I think it said 20,000 new or 19,500 EA controllers shipped in Q1, and that's a pretty impressive number. So clearly, a lot of probably, I would imagine, some pent up demand there that I don't anticipate those numbers being sustainable per se. I think it's a new product. The dealer base is probably very excited about those. I think that they're a very compelling offering. We don't do a lot with Control4 personally here in Denver, but I think they do look like a solid offering, and so the dealer base has clearly responded to that. I'll be curious to see if they can keep that sort of pace up, though. I mean, it definitely strikes me as something that caught fire being a new product, right? And a lot of people were anxious to pull the trigger on those, and so it remains to be seen if that sort of volume can be sustained. I suspect not.
Right. I know they were running a bunch of specials. So this is shipped, not installed. Like, they were running specials where you buy all 3 controllers for a showroom demo type thing. This is one of those things you have to think about. Like, every dealer, not that there's 20,000 dealers out there, but every dealer has to update their showroom. Most of the dealers out there are going to want to have the latest and greatest in their own home. So there's some stuff that gets rotated out there. But that said, I've got to say the EA one at the I think it's $600 MSRP price point. It's bundled with the SR260 remote. That's a great price point for that product, and it's kind of a no-brainer. Like, when you see what you get and the horsepower that you get out of it. It's really, really, really hard to beat that little product. So, and these guys are the big dogs on the block. They chase Crestron out of the CEDIA market. They're gonna have to show that they have the technical chops to keep their product up to date and keep pulling these numbers. Really,
right.
That's what they're gonna have to prove that they can do it. So here they go.
Yeah. Well, and it looks like the market responded a little bit. Seth, I know you hold a few stocks in Control4, right? They got a little bit of a pop the day of the call, and we won't spend a ton of time talking about that. We're not the money show, but shares did rise, looks like 11% on just that day of the call. Now, I haven't gone back and looked to see where they're at now relative to where they were before the call. But there was one point on the day of the earnings call where Julie Jacobson over at CE Pro reported the stock being up 20%. And that was clearly, I think, a bunch of day traders looking for a quick pop, right? And it settled back down at about 11% up on the day. And I think it's kind of hovering there. So good news. Obviously, we talked about the last time we talked about the Control4 stock, it was a decidedly more negative story, and Seeking Alpha had put out a really, really tough piece, just kind of beating the company up and saying that they were doomed, and that it was, just nothing in that stock other than the opportunity to short it. And,
and that guy was shorting it. Like, yep. So he's doing well.
Right. Right.
Oh, that's hilarious. Well, good for him for not understanding what actual home technology is, and completely misrepresenting what Control4 was doing when they lowered price points on their entry level controllers.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, that was an interesting story, and I'm glad we got a chance to talk about it, and also glad to see Control4 doing well. I think they're a bellwether for the industry, obviously being one of the very few, if not the only really true custom install publicly traded company. And I think it gives us a good opportunity, even if you're not into doing financial analysis or watching the stock market. I think it provides some insights to keep an eye on, because it lets you know how the market is responding and looking at our industry. And obviously you have to take that with a grain of salt. I think that there's so much nuance to our industry that a stock analyst isn't necessarily going to understand or want to understand it. And so you've got to take everything through that filter. But I think generally looks like Control4 is doing well, and I'm glad to see it.
Yep. 20,000 controllers is nothing to laugh at all. I mean, that's a good number. Actually, we laughed at this last time, but there are actually 1 billion hubs for HomeKit out there on the market right now, according to Tim Cook. And I think our next story, we're going to talk about HomeKit a little bit, because rumor has it that iOS 10, which comes out, well, it'll come out later this year, but will be introduced at the Developers Conference in San Francisco next couple of months. The rumor is that iOS 10 will have a HomeKit app, a dedicated HomeKit app.
Right. Yeah. And let's get right to the big question here, Seth, because last week we talked about HomeKit and we put an over-under on WWDC, and the over-under was based on how many minutes of coverage or talking that we thought HomeKit would get at the keynote. And I set the over-under at 2 minutes. We both took the under, and I'm going to give you a chance on air right now to retract that or stick with it. What are you doing?
Oh, I think if you go back and listen to me, I say unless there's a Siri in a CAN device. And if there's a Siri in a CAN device, I think it's going to be over,
So you're hedging a little.
I'm hedging, definitely hedging. If there's no hardware, competition to Echo, then I'm not sure that HomeKit gets more than 2 minutes. But this is interesting. If they demo a new app, there might be something to go along with that. If they demo it, it'll be much longer than 2 minutes. But I wonder, how, if this rumor is true, I wonder. I really would like to see, I guess, what Apple does with this app. This will be a reference design. If it's anything like the HealthKit app, where it's just basically a bunch of rows and tables, of data, that's not very interesting. And Apple once was a company that had led the design of interface, and I'd really like to see what they would do for a reference design app for HomeKit. And I think a lot of people have been. There's been a lot of interesting and quite frankly really good HomeKit based apps that have been introduced onto the market. Some that are, like we were talking about with Richard last week, that are tagged along with, their own products, but some that are just, completely standalone HomeKit apps.
Yep.
And I'd really like to see what Apple brings to the table, if in fact they do bring and put a HomeKit app on their phones.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my answer will be much shorter than yours. I'm sticking with the under.
It's probably a good position to be in.
I've been burned too many times. I'm sticking with the under.
So you're not going to stop at a coffee shop this time, are you?
No, I will be. I will be paying very close attention. But I think that it's interesting how this story broke. It was some sort of review on Amazon, and allegedly, at least, the review was being given by an employee at Apple, and he made mention in his review that Apple would be coming out with a standalone HomeKit app, and somebody connected those dots and picked it up, and it, of course, just caught fire on the internet. Apparently, it has since been verified that the guy who posted the review does work at Apple, or at least somebody with the same exact name does, and that's about all we really have to go on. So I don't know. I'm 99% sure that this is valid and imminent, but this isn't something that we know for sure, and I think that's worth pointing out. The other thing is, in my mind, it's like at first I read this and I was like, well, why did this decision take so long? And I was kind of surprised, and then I realized, wait, it's HomeKit. I'm not surprised at all.
Well, Siri in a can could actually be a real thing too. I mean,
that would surprise me. That would surprise me.
I've been thinking about this more and more since the show last week. Like, Amazon has really proven that Alexa is a viable product. I mean, they are shipping tons of these things. Apple developers, I listen to them on podcasts. People who are in the tech field really love the device because it's how playful it is and how well, the voice recognition on it works. Siri's not that bad either. And if they were to come up with a device very similar to Echo, I mean, heck, copy it. I don't care. Iterate it on it a little bit and integrate it with HomeKit, which HomeKit already is integrated with Siri. It could be a pretty good home run and at least gets a foothold or a little stronger of a foothold in the home automation market for Apple. So
yeah,
Siri in a can could be real, Jason.
I like it. Well, now that I stop and think about it, we've been joking about it, but you are right. And you do make a valid point. Amazon has really proven that this idea bears out in the market and people are interested in a product like this and they're voting with their wallets. And I think that there's got to be discussions at the highest level of Apple as to how we respond to this. You can't ignore the success that Amazon is having there, and clearly Apple or any tech company for that matter is not going to be above copying or being inspired by other companies' ideas, right? Apple was not the first company to come out with the idea of a MP3 player or a tablet or a smartwatch, and they are arguably the leader in at least a couple of those categories. And I think that long term, it would make sense for Apple to come out with a product like that. I just don't. I'm not holding my breath for it this year, but I guess that's where we disagree, and we'll see.
Well, think about this too. They already own. How hard would this be for them to do? Like they already. I mean, I say that not being an engineer, not having to work on this at all. But one, they have $1 billion or $100 billion, $200 billion.
Yeah.
So we'll put that on the table. They own like Beats, right? So they have access to these little Bluetooth speaker things, right? Mm-hmm. So adding Siri or some kind of little processor into a Beats, what do they call them? Pills? Is that what it is? The little Beats pill? That would be a really cool product because people like those things. I think all the stars are in alignment. And I'm going to cross my hands, cross my fingers, and say, this could be real. This could be a real thing.
Yeah. Well, I like it, and you make some very valid points. I guess I just always think of Apple as a company that's not. They don't do anything super quickly, right? They really are a company that's always traditionally taken their time and not released a product until it's very polished, refined. Now some people could argue the Apple Watch was maybe not quite there, and I've heard mixed things about it. But traditionally, they've been a company that really takes their time. And so the Amazon Echo is such a recent phenomenon that I'm not holding my breath for this WWDC, but I do think you make some great points, and I think that it probably is only a matter of time, and it remains to be seen. I'll be very interested. I think that as far as an offering or a product, it makes perfect sense. And like I said, Amazon has has already done the hard work of educating the market and proving that the idea is valid. And I certainly wouldn't put it past Apple to come out with something that was very similar in their own version. So they've got all the pieces in place. I just think they're a company that may take a little bit more time to refine that idea and get their messaging right before they put it out in the wild.
Yeah, a valid point as well. I mean, that's what they've done. That's what they've done for years. And, their marketing may claim to have invented the tablet PC and the iPad, but there were definitely Microsoft versions of tablets that were really horrible before then, going back years and years and years before the iPad actually came out. So yeah, very good point. Good point.
We shall see. Let's move on here. We've got another story we want to cover, a couple more actually, before we get into our conversation with Chris Gamble of Live Install. And this one we're going to jump into now. Very big story, and that is the announcement of the Amplify router and extender kit from Ubiquity. Very big news. Ubiquity is a company that we've talked about quite a bit on the show, and in case you're listening and you're not familiar, Ubiquity's always been very well known and I would say well regarded in circles surrounding enterprise grade Wi-Fi. And I know a lot of home technology professionals who are using Ubiquity. I think you included, Seth, with great success in a residential environment. But our issue with Ubiquity, or thing that we've always been careful to point out, is that it's never been a consumer friendly product, and that's for better or worse. Some people might argue that's a good thing, and some might be down on that fact. But this new line, Amplify, very, very clearly targeted at a straight to consumer market, and really cool. So I'll let you describe in a nutshell what Amplify is, Seth, and then you obviously share some of your thoughts on it.
Yeah, you pretty much covered what I would have said about Ubiquity if anybody asked me, "Hey, what do you know about this company?" It's a great product, but it's extremely, I would put it on the harder side to set up, the nerdier side, I suppose, the network engineering side. And
it's a little nerdy. I think that's a fair description.
Yeah. But it works really well as long as it's working. If you have any problems, you're going to need to be a nerd to fix them, because it's not the easiest system. Now, I guess they've heard us talking,
right?
So they've come out with this, and so there's two products. The best I can tell, there's two products, and then from there's 3 different flavors. There is a smart router that has a WAN port and 4 gigabit LAN ports on the back of it. A USB port for what they call future use, which I thought was interesting, which we'll get to a little bit later, and a touchscreen display, which was pretty clever. If you look at some of the videos they have, it shows, the upload, download speed, the connection speed, and some other statistics on the front. I know there are I can't remember the name of it. Is it Almond, or there's a router that has
Almond.
a touchscreen on it?
Almond Plus, yeah. I believe.
So I think that's a great little design element that they've put in. I don't know how useful it'll be for people who are setting this up, but I know that has worked with pretty great success for Almond, to have that little touch screen on the front where you can actually go in and do some basic settings and edit things. But from the instructions, it looked like most everything was actually done from your cell phone, from the app that you'd have to download and set everything up from.
Yep.
To keep talking about the products, there's one more product. It's wireless extenders, and these were actually cleverly designed. It's basically a power plug that you plug into the wall that has a magnet on top, and then you stick this little, paddle on top of it, and you kind of aim it. It's got 4 signal indicator lights on it, and I guess you kind of wiggle it around or move it around the house until it has all 4 signal LEDs lit up, and you get the best signal in that part of the house. According to the instruction manual, it said that you would put these in opposite directions of the router. So the router obviously has Wi-Fi in it as well, but these extend the signal out for those dead zones that you have.
Yeah.
And of course, with Ubiquity, there's 3 very confusing flavors that this comes in. The standard one, which probably would work for most anyone listening to this podcast, a long-range version, which I would be really hesitant to recommend to anybody because I know how the long range version of the Unify product line works. You really, really, really need to have a need for long range access points. Like you really need to have a solid use case for that to actually be a benefit for you. And then an HD version, which has 6 radios in it, basically 6 radios in it versus the 4 radios that the standard and long range versions have in them. So 802.11 AC is supported, and you get up to 1,300 megabits per second, which is the fast internet that everyone wants.
Yep.
This is kind of a big feature for them, is the guest access. I didn't think this was a big deal, but I guess people want to have guest access when people come over to their house. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Seems
I saw them touting that. I wasn't quite sure what to make of that either. So I'm glad to hear it wasn't just me. I was a little confused why that was a big deal, but the idea, I guess, was that it was some sort of timed guest access. So ostensibly you could make your network a little less secure and give guest access for a certain period of time without having to share your password. I don't know. To me, it was kind of marketing speak, and it didn't seem all that compelling. I think that the product overall is very compelling. I think the neatest part about this, and it's very similar, like we talked about Eero not too long ago, and what's cool about this and what makes it really useful for the everyday consumer is that these extenders that you get in conjunction with this router are pre-paired. So you don't have to, you've had the ability forever to go buy a Wi-Fi extender and use it to wirelessly extend the range of your Wi-Fi, but you've had to know a little about being able to go in there and configure it, which boxes to check and make sure you're not actually doing more harm than good. And I think that having a solution like this that's pre-configured, super useful for a lot of people. I think in the professional space, a product like this will make some waves on the smaller projects, maybe multifamily type stuff. I think it's worth pointing out that Seth, you mentioned AC, wireless AC, and just want to make sure people are clear that AC is only supported on the high end one, the Amplify HD. The other 2 models do not support AC, and the only difference between the base bundle, which is $199, and then you go up to the Amplify LR, which is $299, I believe. And again, that's the long range, so it just has higher transmission power. Same number of radios on the base station and extenders. It's only when you get up to that Amplify HD for $350 that you get AC support.
We're gonna have to track these guys down because, as usual with most Ubiquity products, the marketing just isn't quite up to par. But I'm looking at the spec sheets. It says AC, N, A, B, and G are all supported on all 3. Huh. So something.
All right. Well,
something
we got conflicting information. Yeah. I can't remember where, I made a bunch of notes and I read a number of stories. So we'll have to.
Oh, it's very confusing. I'll throw that out there right now. Their products are very, very hard to parse through and understand exactly what it is that they do. And then even when you do that, you think you understand it. You go talk to their engineers and they're like, no, don't do that. You need to turn that feature off. So
that's always been my challenge with Ubiquity. But I think it's a great looking product. Probably the biggest question that jumps to my mind just from having past experience working with Ubiquity and trying to get support when I did have trouble. It was very difficult, very forum based. It wasn't like you could just call and get somebody on the phone. And I'm curious, with a straight to consumer product like this, do they have a plan to address support differently than they have in the past?
They, on their website, they claim they are going to do 24/7 worldwide chat support. So, it's chat based. It's not going to be, a phone and pick up a phone and yell at somebody kind of thing. But it's kind of interesting to think about. If your internet's down, how do you get on this chat thing?
Good question.
I don't know if they thought this through.
We'll see. It's a shiny looking product for sure. Ubiquity does a great job of of making their products very sleek looking. The industrial design looks very cool, very clearly designed to be in sight, not necessarily hidden out of view. And so I think they did. You disagree, huh?
That was the huge thing in their marketing pillar, just like a router that you could finally show off to people. And I'm like, no, I'm not going to show this thing off. It's going to go where all the other routers go. It's going to go in a closet somewhere. I don't want to look at this thing.
That's true.
It's be seen, not heard type thing, like,
yeah. And I agree completely, but you got to put yourself in I think the situation of the target buyer for a product like this is in many instances not going to be in a home that had like a structured wiring plan, right? So the router is going to have to live on a desk because that's the only place that the electrician pulled a coax to or a category cable to. So clearly it's an issue of who they're marketing at there. Your point is well taken.
Yeah, I think this is, that Eero company you mentioned, we talked about them a couple weeks back. This is definitely a competitor for them. And I think a company, I mean, this is Ubiquity. The things they excel at aren't necessarily Wi-Fi in your house. They're doing the wireless backend for ISPs. I mean, they excel in wireless, and they understand. They have wireless engineers just like all over. So these guys really understand how Wi-Fi works. And I think a company like Eero and heck even Apple are going to have a hard time competing with a really cool product like this. One thing we should mention, that USB port I said has future use. There is a modular kind of thing that snaps on to support other what they call IoT devices in the future, which is a horrible. Why does anybody say IoT? I don't know. It's just a horrible way of saying that. Just say home automation or cameras or something. Just say what it is. Like IoT, again, this goes back. This is a company chock full of really, really, really smart engineers. Mm-hmm. And the IoT buzzword is great for engineers, but not for anybody else. But that's true. IoT, they're gonna do smart home.
Yeah, it looks like it. I read an article in Ars Technica, and I'm quoting here. It says, it was hinted that the Amplify base station and extenders will be just the opening salvo in an entire new field of consumer products for Ubiquity. And I thought that was a very interesting aspect to the story. I'm glad you brought it up. We'll be really curious to see what other consumer products Ubiquity is considering. Clearly, it's going to be, like you alluded to, some sort of play at the smart home. I think that's pretty obvious, but it'll be really interesting, in my opinion, to see how that takes shape. So definitely a company we'll be keeping a close eye on, and I think we'd really enjoy getting them on the show sometime. So we'll work on that and see if we can make that happen. Let's move on. We got one final story here we're going to touch on pretty quickly before we jump into our interview with Chris Gamble, and that is an acquisition of Fing by Domots. Now, Domots is an interesting company that we had on a few weeks ago, and they're, if you're not familiar, a technology monitoring, remote management solution, very similar. If you know of IHG, same sort of idea. It's a little box you put on the network, and it gives you the ability to remotely monitor and manage client systems, and a really cool looking product, and sounded like they have a lot of great ideas. And they recently acquired Fing, and Fing is a really cool app that I've used in the past. A very easy to use network scanning utility that can be used to gather information such as IP addresses and MAC addresses of devices on your network. And so I think that's a pretty obvious, valuable pairing between those two companies, and I think it'll be interesting to see how that develops. Yeah,
Fing has, they're saying, is over 12 million app downloads or installs, and it's growing 40,000 downloads a day. I think I've used this or an app just like it in the past, and like you said, this makes total sense for these two guys, Domots and Fing, to get together and put their heads together on monitoring and discovering devices on the network. Good deal. I really don't have much to say about it. It sounds like a good marriage here.
Yeah, definitely. Well, without further ado, let's jump into our conversation with Chris Gamble. Once again, Chris is with Live Install, And he joined us on this episode to discuss a recent visit to a trade show, builder show out there in the UK called Grand Designs Live. And it was an interesting conversation to hear how home technology fit into this show and how it was generally received amongst a very mixed audience of homeowners and builders and other trades that were there. And I think it's a really interesting to see how that show or to hear how that show took shape and what Chris's experience was there at Grand Designs Live. So let's go ahead and jump into our conversation. Hey, Chris, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Hi, Jason. Yeah, I'm really good. Thanks for having me on again.
Great. Yeah, our pleasure. We're happy to have you back. It's been a little while since we spoke, and it's always fun to get you on and talk about what's going on in your neck of the woods. And I know you're recently back from a trip to Grand Designs Live, which is a show that we're gonna talk about here and get into, and I look forward to that conversation. But before we start that, for any of our listeners who may not be familiar with you, why don't you give us a quick introduction?
Okay, my name is Chris Gamble. I'm the owner of a UK-based smart home install business called Customized. That keeps me busy really between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. After hours, I run a Twitter account called @LiveInstall, which also has a hashtag called #LiveInstall. And that's an active social media role that operates as a community, meshing smart home installers and suppliers across the globe.
Yep, and it is a great Twitter handle and a great hashtag as well. I would encourage anybody listening who's into home technology and hasn't yet checked that out, definitely do it. It's a great resource. And Chris has been kind enough to agree to join us on a pretty regular basis here. We like to get Chris on and catch up. As he mentioned, he's over there in the UK, so definitely brings a different perspective on what's going on in the smart home, and that's why we're here tonight. So let's jump in. Chris, I know you were just out at Grand Designs Live, and let's just start at the very high level. For people who aren't familiar with what that show is, give us the elevator pitch. What's Grand Designs all about?
A trade show based in London, which attracts visitors from both consumer or home builder angle, but also from the construction industry, so architects, developers, interior designers, and other tradespeople. It attracts numbers in excess of 30,000 visitors. It's held over 10 days. And the show comes off the back of a very popular television program in the UK called Grand Designs. And I know that's also available or screened in around the globe. And the show is one that we've been involved with manufacturers and trade organizations for the last 4 years.
Very cool. What type of what's the audience, I guess, for Grand Designs Live? Is it a dealer based show, or is it just kind of a DIY? Anybody shows up?
Yeah, it's open to the public, and it definitely attracts the majority. I would say are home builders, renovators, DIY enthusiasts, but it also attracts a trade audience. So you will speak to architects and designers throughout the 10 days of the show.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. So I guess let's dig a little bit more into the show here. It looks like there's some talks and some, just like any trade show, there's talks and there's some exhibitors. I guess what did you participate in, and what did you see that piqued your interest while you were there?
Okay, we were present, or I was present there on two roles. One was representing CEDIA in an area called Ask an Expert, which handpicked people from different parts of a construction project. So there were architects, landscape gardeners, insurance advisors, finance, home technology, where we were present. And that was pre-booked slots where visitors to the show, mainly consumers or home builders, or ideas, and spend a 20 to 30 minute time slot with you and discuss their projects that they had in mind or that were actually active.
Huh, that sounds cool.
Yeah, so the visitors to the Ask an Expert really were coming from really thirsty for knowledge, but broader knowledge, obvious questions like, do I need home technology? How do I prepare my building? How do I find a trusted installer for systems that I may want to have?
Mm-hmm. And so you said
the questions were very, very broad, yeah.
Sorry, I think we're having a little bit of a delay here on the Skype call, so we're battling that a little bit. But you said you were there in a couple of different capacities, and so you mentioned one as CEDIA, sort of an ask an expert area. There was one other capacity I believe you told us that you were there in, and that was your capacity as an HDL dealer. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, one of our suppliers, a manufacturer, HDL, they have a stand at Grand Design, and they invite their dealers, or handpick some dealers, to come and speak to homeowners specifically about the product, specifically about home automation, and try and give homeowners more detailed information about first fix wiring, programming of home automation systems, trying to help them with budgeting, because their ideas of how much they should spend projects can vary between only a few £100 to the larger properties needing to spend tens of thousands of pounds. So it helps for them to visit the stand and speak to someone that will or possibly will be working with them on the project. So it's beneficial for my business to be there.
Yeah, I can imagine. Let's focus on the CEDIA, Ask an Expert area. And as I understand, and as you were describing it, there was sort of an area of the show that was kind of cordoned off and specifically laid out for this sort of thing. And tell me a little about the sort of inquiries that you received there and how it was generally received by the people that you talked to.
Okay, so there were pre-booked slots, and you had to reserve your 20 to 30 minute slot with the expert. And I know the people that visited would shuffle around the Ask an Expert area. So if they've spoken to me, then they would jump on to speak to an architect. But when they spoke to myself or any other CEDIA experts that were there, their questions were really based around really basic questions, I would say. Do I need it? What is it? Is it not all wireless these days? The real obvious questions. And I think with it being pre-booked, they were a little bit they weren't really sure of what to expect. Whereas when they stepped onto the HDL stand, they knew they were coming to speak about home automation, a product, and it seemed a bit more detailed, the discussions. Now, I would say that the time on the stand was hit and miss. It wasn't the most popular area in the Ask an Expert arena. I know the architects were busy, garden designers, people that were discussing finance for your building projects. They seemed to be busy throughout the show.
That sounds like a pretty cool and really interesting talk. I wish we had something, and maybe we do, and I just don't know about it, or never been invited to it, but I wish we had something similar here. Because, I mean, Jason, and you can jump in too. Like, these are questions that I get every single day. In fact, I got them 2 or 3 times today. Isn't everything wireless?
Oh yeah.
Where do I start?
Yeah.
And I think that's a great resource, for this type of venue for a mass audience to come in and actually learn about what can be put into their home.
Well, and I think I'll jump in here too. I think it's a good opportunity for home tech professionals to be at a show like this because, as Chris sort of alluded to, a lot of the people going to these shows may not be going there with the expressed intent of figuring out what they're going to do for their home technology, right? They might be thinking of everything else in the home but that. And when they get there and they get in front of a home technology professional, it's a good opportunity to let them know what's possible. Let them know that no, in fact, not everything is going wireless. That's my favorite. I deal with it every day and actually coincidentally just did an article for a local design magazine here that I'm doing some writing for called Modern in Denver about that. And I think it's a topic that comes up very often. And I certainly don't fault people for thinking that wireless technology is everywhere around us. And it's a little bit nuanced to understand why. That's not a cure-all, but it doesn't surprise me to hear that you were fielding that inquiry at the show. And glad you were able to kind of be there and dispel some of those rumors. You mentioned that the presence at the HDL booth was a little bit different. And what I gather, Chris, is that it was different because people who came to that booth, presumably to speak with you, had an exact idea, and they were coming there for the purpose of learning more and not necessarily just maybe out of curiosity. And so talk about the HDL booth and people's general reaction to that and some of the more interesting types of inquiries or interactions that you had at that booth.
Yes, the HDL stand was a different kettle of fish altogether. No pre-booked slots. It was like speed dating for smart home. They were queuing up. You were no sooner taking the details of one, and you were getting pulled by another customer to show you their keypads, look at their plans, discuss a wireless system versus a wired system, which HDL offer. That it's intense on that stand. It's demand is high. The customers are coming equipped with greater knowledge year on year, and we've seen that over the 4 years we've been supporting HDL there. They have brand recognition already. The consumer does. They're mentioning Control 4, they're mentioning Lutron and Loxon, and so they're there to test your knowledge. They're there to tap into your expertise. So it's a real test of your knowledge, but a test of stamina, patience. It's good fun. You get a real buzz off the intensity. And
cool. I want to just kind of jump in one little thing here. If I think I know we've talked about it in the past, but if anybody here in the States doesn't know exactly what HDL is, maybe you can chime in a little bit about what that product line is. It's probably similar to maybe like Lutron with keypads or Crestron. I think they have an entire home automation line. Is that correct?
Yeah, HDL is a very comprehensive home automation platform that we use and have great success with. It covers all the bases from lighting control, underfloor heating or traditional heating. Also takes care of any HVAC. Also has background music capabilities. First and foremost, great looking keypads ranging from capacitive touch to simple push button, custom engraving, color touchscreen, custom finishes, and all based around a hardwired topology using KNX 4-core bus cable or twisted pair bus cable. So a really robust system which finds itself quite happy in a residential, commercial, and hospitality environments.
Yeah, it looks like a very nice system. I mean, you go to the website and look around at some of the products that they have, and heck, some of the hero images they have on there for some of their projects. It's like, man, I wish we had stuff here in the States that looked this good. I guess we kind of do. Some of the Lutron stuff, super high end Lutron stuff, looks as good, but nothing with that.
I know that HDL are going to be at CEDIA Expo this year.
Very cool.
And we're speaking with them. Maybe if we could join in with them, tag along, or be a representative. So we'll see. That might pan out this later in the year.
Nice, yeah. So going back to your time there at the booth when you were kind of going over with at the HDL section. I mean, were you going over these plans with maybe potential clients, or like? Do you get any, as a company, do you get any leads out of those? Or is that something that, after you guys talk, you kind of part ways and they go do their project and you go back home and you do yours?
Yeah, we do secure work out of the show. The leads are managed by HDL. It's their stand. It's their data. but ultimately they're a supplier to the trade, and they want to join up a customer with one of their installer partners. So as the year progresses, we might get drip-fed projects or given leads to chase down and secure. And that journey's already begun. But on the stand, we're not handing out our own cards. We're wearing an HDL branded shirt. We're not there to represent our own businesses. We can talk about our businesses and our experience with the products, but yeah, it's all managed by HDL, and I think that's good on their behalf, that they're helping to feed their customers, create their own customers. So yeah, it's a really successful blueprint, and I'm really surprised to not see more manufacturers, distributors present at the UK's biggest consumer-facing home building show.
Yeah, I mean, and so forgive me if I asked that question and it sounded kind of obtuse, but like we just don't have that here in the States, where a big manufacturer like, Crestron or Control 4 would go to a trade show like this and, have dealers sitting in their booth with, Control 4 or Crestron or AM, whatever. Savant t-shirts on. Like usually they staff them, but I'm gathering it from talking to you and from talking to Chris Pinder, like business is just completely different over there, and that's why we have you on the show, because some of these things you guys the lines get a little bit blurred, quite frankly, when I'm looking at what's going on overseas compared to what we have going on over here.
Yeah, well, I was heavily involved with pioneering the setup with HDL and them, and having their installers on the stand. 4 years ago, when HDL arrived in the UK, and we were early adopters of the product, we discussed how do we, get in front of homeowners quickly. Grand Design's biggest show in the UK. They had already committed to it, and we stuck our hand up and said we can help. And others volunteered to lend a day, several days, whatever they could lend. And again, this year we had HDL installers from across the UK attending the show to support their supplier.
It's a great idea. It really is,
yeah.
and surprisingly something that I've just hasn't really crossed my mind or something. But maybe, who knows? Maybe we've got some listeners at Lutron or Control 4 or Savant that'll follow suit and take you up. And if you're listening, I'd be happy to come man the booth.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm thinking too.
No, it's very cool. Were there other, definitely don't need a list or anything, but was there other, I'm just trying to get a feel, was there other home technology manufacturers exhibiting at the show, and roughly how many? Are we talking about a lot, just a few? What was sort of the general presence for other home technology manufacturers?
There wasn't any directly comparable manufacturers like a Control 4, a Lutron, a Loxon. There were dealers using these brands at the show. They may have had the product on their stand alongside other products that their business sells. Some were very heavily focused on home cinema. Some were focused on multi-room audio, and others just focused in on home automation. But they were doing it off their own backs. They were maybe supported with some equipment, but not with direct, help with the stand or funding, or they were doing it off their own backs, and they will do well from that. I spent some time talking to these guys in my capacity as live install that allows me to kind of talk to anybody, and nobody really has this "he's the competition" feel around it. I've got quite a kind of have good links with most people in the industry because of it, but they are all doing well at that show, and they've booked up for next year, most of them that we spoke to. So, but no manufacturers, apart from maybe, I would say maybe some of the larger brands that are diverse, appearing in the smart home space. So British Gas, a large energy provider, world famous, have their Hive thermostat and hot water control device. They were there. Um, there was a technology area that showed some home gadgets featuring brands like NetAtmo, LiFX, Dyson, iRobot, vacuum cleaner. So yeah, the brands are there. The customers are the visitors are seeing a lot of home technology on display, but uniquely HDL are giving them a really showing off their product, allowing you to speak to installers who will be the kind of people that are going to appear at your home, but with that endorsement from manufacturer or distributor level. So I think that helps moving forward when you're
Sure.
chasing these leads.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of companies that were more in the, I guess, point solution or gadget type of business. I was looking at the website for the show and saw an area that they were referring to as the Grand Tech Hub, and presumably this is where some of those companies were gathered together in a part of the show that was really designed to showcase technology. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, there was regular seminars. They had a host at the Technology Theatre, and he would pinpoint on a gadget, and he would, it was there on display. You could see live demonstrations of what it might be capable of, if it was a robotic lawnmower or a security camera slash light. These things were being displayed, being talked about, and the host was very good at giving scenarios of where these products would enhance your lifestyle.
Got it. There was one, we're running tight on our time here, so we're going to start to wrap up, but there was one particular interaction or story that you told me about coming out of the show that I thought was very interesting. And once you told me about it, I went and researched it myself a little bit. And it was this Neos, which is an insurance company. And they're offering what they're calling smart home insurance, which is, well, I'll let you tell us about it. What is smart home insurance?
Well, Neos caught my eye because they were in the technology area, and the show is split up into different sectors. Why is home insurance in the technology area? Well, this was an insurance company with a home tech twist. With your regular home insurance policy, you would also have bundled with that some free connected home devices. You had a SmartThings hub. You had a couple of Fibaro sensors, including smoke detectors, and you had a NetAtmo home security camera, indoor camera. And they would pre-configure these devices with a well laid out, well designed app that was monitored. There was support available, which made me wonder who was behind this insurance company with a twist. And as I spoke to the people on the stand, it became apparent that they had links with Fibaro. They had links with custom installation businesses. They have talked. I think they're still at beta stage, but they also talked about having a very widespread installer network that they can tap into to service these new policyholders with home tech. And they did talk about up to 10,000 tradespeople available to support this, which would be interesting to see how that develops. But hey, home insurance, but with free gadgets, I think it could go quite far.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. We've been seeing some of that over here. We've seen a couple of companies offer maybe a security system with fire detection, or I've seen some offer Nest thermostats to keep energy bills low. But not to this extent. This is a clever idea, and it's not a completely altruistic one, right? Because this is going to eventually make the insurance lower to on these homes that have, working monitored fire alarms in them. Here in the States, you can actually get, or at least here in Florida, you can get a deduction or a discount on your homeowner's insurance if you have a monitored fire alarm system installed. maybe they're using those deductions to kind of pay back for, pay back the system and still sell you a small little service on top of it. Not a clever idea, not a bad idea at all, but a clever idea to bundle this in with your homeowner's insurance. I like it.
Yeah, I think there'll also be the facility for the policyholder to go to an online store, add more devices to their system and grow their system, not just around maybe home monitoring, but they could add integration with audio devices, their television products, and well, ultimately build a smart home. And if they can be the online store where they go and purchase that and manage the app and provide the technical support, then they're a realistic competitor to the professional smart home installer out there. So it's something to keep an eye on, certainly in the UK.
Sure, yeah. It's a very interesting idea what they're doing there. I get it. It could eventually compete with something, some projects that you and I would put in. But then again, maybe we would get hired to install these type systems anyway, because most people I know don't want to have to deal with the setting up and verifying that everything's set up correctly. They just want to have somebody do it for them. But it's an interesting way of getting technology into the home, and I'm curious to see if this kind of idea moves over here to the States as well. Again, something else you guys are we could take the lead and follow you guys on. So Chris, we're running a little low on time tonight, and I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your thoughts. If people want to reach out to you and ask a little bit more about the show that you attended, or just chat with you in general, what's a good way of getting in touch with you?
Definitely through Twitter. 2 Twitter handles, @Customized, my own business, and then @LiveInstall is the smart home install community. Use the hashtag to engage, or tweet us directly if you have a home tech question.
Awesome. Well, I will echo what Seth said, and thank you so much for taking the time to come on and join us all the way from the UK here, and we really appreciate you working on our schedule and joining us on Home Tech. What's next for you on the event scene? I know you're a busy guy and you're out running around. What do you have planned on the horizon here?
Next week we have the CEDIA Tech Forum in London, where there's lots of training sessions to take part in and good networking opportunities. And then we roll into July. We've got Essential Install Live, their South-based show near London, where I'm going to be taking part. I'm one of their judges on their Smart Buildings Awards, and I'm doing some talks on social media and boosting your presence online to other installers.
Awesome. Well, good luck with everything, and I'm sure we'll have you on again in not too long. So thanks again, Chris, for coming on and joining us.
Thanks, Seth. Thanks, Jason.